Okay, so today we're going to talk about writing your introduction, so everyone should be looking this way. Remember your stuff is on the board there, so if you want that as a reminder. An effective introduction is going to have a couple of things. Number one, we've already talked about this all yesterday, but you need to know who your audience is. You can leave it on, because I don't know how visible it is by the screen. You need to know your structure. You need to know what is needed to engage the reader, so you don't want to be really bland and boring. Does everyone remember when I was reading out of the WKCE booklet?
Yeah.
That's bland and boring. That's not exciting for anyone, right? Even though it's informative, you guys could have cared less. I probably haven't memorized what I'm supposed to say. And also, you need to introduce the topics that you're going to be talking about. So at this point, if you're going to write your introduction, you need to know how you're going to write it. If you're going to write it by topic, if you're going to write it chronologically, if you're going to write it about what is important. Okay? So first of all, the audience we talked about yesterday. Who's going to be reading this? I'm definitely going to be reading it. Your classmates are going to be reading it. Other teachers will be reading it. And I said possibly at the bottom here because some of you at the end we're going to be creating iBooks. Maybe we're going to be sharing this with people in our community or people at the library or things like that where they can utilize these things to teach other kids. Okay? The second most important thing, your structure. So now that you know what your structure is, you're going to be able to, you can just set it down right there. Now that you know your structure is, you're going to be able to write based upon that. So if you're writing in chronological order, when you write your introduction, you're going to specifically say, not I'm writing in chronological order, but you're going to say your ideas based off of chronological order. Whereas if you're doing it topic-based or important-based, you're going to do it a different way. I'll take questions at the end. The next most important thing is you need to engage the readers in the introduction. I have always used 4 ways to do this, and in most of your writing I've sort of seen those 4 ways. But the first way is going to be, and I'll zoom in on this if I can. So I'm just going to make it bigger for you so you can see it. Okay. So, the first way, I'll make it big for now, but then I'll make it smaller. The first way is going to be with a fact. So, you would use a fact. This is one that a lot of you use already. You find an interesting fact, you write the fact. So, an example, actually I'm just going to do the play version of this so that I can see all that I'm writing. Okay. So the example that I have is the Paleo Indians only hunted using spears and they were able to kill animals such as mammoths with those spears. So I took a fact that I thought was interesting and something that you might have thought is cool, because I'm thinking in terms of, this is a bunch of kids who are going to be reading this. A lot of you are interested in fighting and death. Okay, would you close that please? So, my fun fact for you to start the piece, because I'm thinking about you as my audience, was something to do with the tools they used and the fact that they killed huge beasts with such a simple tool. The second option is going to be a quote. You need to quote directly from a source if you're going to use a quote, so that's a person, that could be a website. You need to use quotation marks, and you have to cite that. And I'll show you how to cite at a later date. But if you use quotation marks for now, at least then I know you're citing. An example that I had for that was the Paleo-Indian era marks the first colonization of in the world by Homo sapiens. Okay, and that was, I found that at a specific organization website. So I thought that would be an interesting fact that's quoted from a site. That's a way that you can grab readers. The next one's a rhetorical question. A lot of you ask rhetorical questions all the time in your writing. So you're pretty good at this one. So it's a question that you're not intending the reader to answer. The question I use is, did you know that Paleo-Indians hunted mastodons with spears and were able to kill them? Okay, so it's sort of the same thing as my fact, but I'm turning it around and asking it as a question. Did you know that? Okay, so I wonder statements are going to be some of your rhetorical questions. And then the last one is tell a short story. And that's basically if you find an example of a story on a website. So maybe Paleo-Indians especially were prehistoric, so you're not going to find a lot of stories. You might find some cultures or traditions. You can tell about the tradition. Make sure you quote where it comes from, but then that's going to be your attention. The next thing after you have that attention grabber, so one of those four things is going to be the first sentence. So it's going to excite your reader to read on. The second thing is you're going to introduce your topics. In that, you need to introduce the way that you're going to be writing. Okay, so that goes back to the chronological, that goes back to the topic base, that goes back to the importance base. So the examples that I use, and I just kind of chose, I did a chronological one and then I did a topic one, and I don't want you to write exactly what these say. These are just, really, these are just things that I thought of while I was making this. Is throughout this piece, you'll be learning about the 5 different eras of early natives, and some of the different tools, cultures, and traditions they were part of. So for that one, I was talking about the eras. So they already know that I'm going to organize it by chronological order, so by eras, and within those, I'm going to talk about tools, cultures, and traditions. Okay, so I've already made it very obvious how they're going to be learning. The second one, throughout this piece you'll be learning about the tools, cultures, and traditions that the 5 early tribes used. In this one, I'm stating that there are going to be sections about tools, there are going to be sections about cultures, there are going to be sections about traditions, and then within those sections I'm going to talk about each of the 5 different cultures. Does that make sense? So you can already tell how I'm going to write my paper. Okay, so what's the first sentence? What's a way we could call that? Emma? A hook. Okay, attention grabber. And then what's the second part? Nina?
Introduction.
What's that?
Introduction.
Well, introduction of what?
Wait. Topic.
Introduction of the topics. Okay, so you need to have that in your introduction. Your introduction might only be 2 sentences long. Your introduction might also be a fun facts, an explanation of the facts, and then you have this introduction of the topics. It could be 5 or 6 sentences long. It really should never be longer than that because someone doesn't want to keep reading about the introduction. They want to get into the meat of the paper. So my task for you today, and we'll write one really quickly as a group, to show you what it should look like, is using your knowledge of writing structure, audience, and how you want to engage readers. I want you to write the introduction to your piece. That's your goal by the end of the day. You don't need to have all the facts. You don't have to have all the research done. All you need for this is a attention grabber and knowing how you're going to write it. Okay? Easy enough? Alright, so really quickly, as a class, let's choose an attention grabber. Okay, so this should be about all 5 tribes in some way. Connor?
Did you know, did you know that the early Native Americans that lived in different times used all different tools?
Okay, so did you know that early natives used different tools?
Depending on what time they lived?
Tools.
Depending on time period.
Depending on time, the time period.
Depending on
Time period and
their
culture.
era. What makes this exciting though? Did you know that early natives used different tools depending on their era, even though, Emma?
Oh, I don't know anything to add to that, but
Okay, just a sec. How about even though they all lived in the same place?
Yeah.
Okay, because that makes it exciting. It's not exciting to me that early natives use different tools depending on the era, because if someone lived in Arizona and someone lived in Wisconsin, they're obviously going to use different tools. The interesting thing about this is that they all live in the same place, so it's unusual to us that they would all use different tools. So did you know that early natives use different tools depending on their era, even though
they lived
in the same place? And how do we end that sentence? Question mark, because it is a question. Did you know? Okay, what's the next part? Emma, do you have something else to add quick?
Well, I have another
Attention grabber? Save it for yours. Okay? What's the next part? McKenna, please turn that off. What was the next part? Introducing the topics. So how could we do that? Should we just, for the sake of doing this, should we just use one of these? Okay?
In this you will learn what?
In this what?
In this book you will learn.
Is it a book?
Grammar.
I would call it a piece.
In this piece you will learn different natives of Wisconsin use different things. So
Okay, so in this piece you will learn how 5 different different
Not
tribes.
tribes, because each era has their own different tribes.
So we're going to call them eras. So in this piece, you will learn how 5 different eras
Of Native Americans.
of natives
Learn to live and hunt.
Lived and hunted.
Okay, lived and hunted. Cole, did you have something?
I was treasuring.
Okay, using different tools. I heard that from Emma. Okay, so do you think this is sufficient? Did you know that early natives used different tools depending on their era, even though they lived in the same place? In this piece, you will learn how 5 different eras of natives lived and hunted using different tools. So how are we setting up our paper? Looking at that, are we going to set it based off of topic, or are we going to set it based off of chronological importance? Bailey?
Topic.
It's based off of topic. Do we agree? Emma?
Chronological.
Chronological? Who thinks it's chronological? Who thinks it's topic? Who has no idea? What I want you to look at is the first thing that we said. In this piece, you will learn how 5 different eras. An era has to do with time, right? So your main sections are going to have to do with the eras. So your first section is going to be Paleo-Native, Paleo-Indian. Second one's going to be Archaic. Third is Woodland. Fourth is Mississippian, and the fifth one would be Aniota. Okay? So those are going to be your main sections. Within those subsections, or within those sections, the things you're going to talk about are how they lived, how they hunted, and how they used tools. Okay, does this make sense? So this is your whole introduction. Not too hard? Does everyone think they can get that done today? Okay, so on your Google Doc, your task for the day to start is going to be to write an introduction like this. Okay, then underneath that you can keep taking notes. That's what you're going to do for the rest of the day today. Now I will take questions.
Excluding literacy?
Nina.
So at the end, we're going to have a whole piece done.
By the end of next week, we are together going to write a whole paper. Together. So you're writing your own, but I'm helping you with each individual section. So that when you go on to your different eras I talked about yesterday, you will have all the tools that you need, and you will have access to all of these presentations. Remember, the other classes aren't going to have all these, so you can share them with them as well. But you can go back and you can do it step by step, just like we're doing here, so that you can write your own paper, and it's going to be a quality, proficient, or advanced proficient paper. Okay, any other questions? All right, with that, you can get started.
Thank you.